In the shadow of the Ottoman Empire's gilded walls, where power and decadence intertwined, a silent conspiracy brewed, one that would forever alter the course of history. Behind the doors of the harem, where beauty and wealth were in abundance, there was a far darker truth lurking: betrayal. Eunuchs, once mere servants to the sultans in their harems, were about to ignite a forbidden plot, an act of rebellion that would not only claim lives, but threaten the very foundation of an empire. This is the story of how ambition, fear, and blood led to the collapse of power in the heart of the Ottoman palace. Before we delve into the labyrinth of treachery, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more untold tales from the depths of history. Now, let's uncover the mystery behind this forbidden plot. Within the vast, intricate corridors of the Topkapi Palace, the eunuchs lived in the shadows, unseen but always watching. But behind their silence, a deadly scheme was taking shape, fueled by secrets, greed, and the longing for a power they were never meant to possess. They weren't just guardians of the Sultan's women, they had become the silent architects of a conspiracy that would one day echo in the annals of history. The harem, with its lush gardens and hidden rooms, was about to become a battleground of loyalty, betrayal, and death. Power and trust were fragile commodities in the palace, and the eunuchs knew that better than anyone. The Sultan's rule was absolute, but not without its fractures. These fractures would soon split wide open, creating a deadly power vacuum that the eunuchs were eager to fill. As the palace crumbled under the weight of its own intrigue, blood would be spilled. It wasn't just a coup, it was the collision of worlds within the empire itself. The eunuchs, once powerless, had begun to taste the sweetness of rebellion, and they were willing to risk everything to claim it. The air in the Topkapi Palace was thick with the scent of roses and incense, the faint sound of distant conversations drifting through its ornate hallways. But in the hidden corners of the sprawling complex, where only shadows dared to linger, a different kind of tension stirred. The eunuchs, men who had been castrated as children and brought into the Sultan's service, moved like ghosts through these chambers. Silent, unseen, they were always there, in the spaces between the grand silk curtains and beneath the stone arches of the Sultan's palace. They guarded the harem's secrets, but they also held a far darker one of their own. In those days, the eunuchs were the keepers of everything valuable in the palace: the treasures, the women, the hearts of the Sultan's harems. They were more than just servants. They were silent watchers over the empire's most sacred and intimate spaces. But their power was never visible. They were men whose voices were never heard, whose desires could not be fulfilled. For a long time, they were unseen, but in their silence, they plotted. Among them was a man named Ahmed. He had been raised within the palace's cold stone walls, shaped by the cruelty of his fate. He had known nothing but the palace, nothing but the duty forced upon him. He had witnessed power, had seen the Sultan's inner circle rise and fall like the tides. He had watched as political schemes played out in the courts, as whispers of betrayal turned the minds of the powerful against one another. But the eunuchs, those who served with no hope of ever rising to the throne themselves, had never been more than pawns. Yet Ahmed knew better. He had learned that power could be taken, even by those who were meant to serve. Power, he realized, was not always visible. It was often hidden in plain sight. And in the harem, where the Sultan's favorites resided, it was a power in the hands of the eunuchs, though they were never allowed to take the throne. This thought consumed him. The harem was the heart of the palace, the place where the Sultan's wives, concubines, and servants lived, loved, and sometimes died. To the outside world, it was a realm of decadence, luxury, and beauty, a dream. But within, it was a cage. The women who lived there had little freedom. They were either the Sultan's chosen concubines or the wives of his princes, each holding her own place in the complex hierarchy of the palace.
The eunuchs watched over them, ensuring that no one crossed forbidden lines, that no secrets were allowed to slip past the silken curtains. Yet some of the eunuchs had begun to see themselves as more than mere guardians. Their constant proximity to the power of the Sultan, their role in the very preservation of his empire, had made them feel entitled. They had seen the rise and fall of men in the Sultan's court, and they had learned from the deadly politics that were played out every day. They had learned that one could either sit idly by and watch history unfold, or step forward and shape it.
Ahmed, along with a small faction of eunuchs, began to gather in secret, their faces shadowed by the weight of their desires. They had begun to whisper of a different future, one where they could seize power for themselves. It was not just the harem that they longed to control. They wanted the Sultan's throne, the very heart of the empire. But how? The answer came in a whispered conversation one fateful night in the gardens, where even the moon dared not shine too brightly. The Sultan, weak from years of indulgence and paranoia, had grown increasingly isolated. His grip on the empire had slipped. One of his closest allies, a powerful vizier, had fallen from favor, leaving a vacuum in the palace's politics. The eunuchs had been waiting for this moment, watching carefully, patiently. This was their chance. And so, as the harem slept beneath its layers of silence and silk, the eunuchs began to form their plan. It was nothing less than a revolt, a quiet coup that would shift the balance of power if they were willing to risk everything for it. For too long, they had been nothing more than servants, but now they would be masters of their own destiny. But in the dark corners of the palace, not everyone shared Ahmed's vision. A handful of the older, more traditional eunuchs saw the danger in such ambition. To them, the thought of rebellion was blasphemy, a betrayal of everything they had sworn to protect. The empire's stability, its very soul, rested on its obedience to the Sultan and his court. And if they dared to defy the order that had shaped their lives, they would be throwing everything into chaos, a chaos that might burn the empire to the ground. In the deep silence of the palace, Ahmed stood alone, his thoughts heavy with the weight of his choices. His hand trembled as he touched the cold stone walls that had always kept him safe, but now they felt like a prison. The question remained, could he escape his fate? Could he lead his fellow eunuchs to victory without it destroying everything they had ever known? The night stretched long as Ahmed wandered the palace grounds, his mind swirling with the consequences of his plans. Every footstep seemed to echo, not just through the empty halls, but in his very soul. The harem, once a sanctuary of luxury and silence, had become the perfect storm of hidden power, and now it was the battlefield. Ahmed knew that if he and his fellow eunuchs were to move forward, it would mean crossing a line from which there would be no return. The eunuchs had been careful so far, biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment. Their plotting had been slow and methodical, with no one outside their inner circle suspecting the stirrings of rebellion. They knew that in such a world, one misstep would bring down their entire conspiracy, yet inaction was as dangerous as betrayal. With each passing day, the tension grew thicker and the stakes higher. But within the walls of the harem, no one knew. The women, the concubines, the wives, and the Sultan's children lived their lives within a tightly guarded world of luxury. They were kept under constant surveillance, surrounded by the eunuchs who ensured that no one would ever cross the boundaries set by the Sultan. Yet as close as these men were to the Sultan's secrets, they were never truly seen. Their role was clear: protect the Sultan's most valuable possessions. But as power shifted hands within the palace, the line between protector and manipulator began to blur. Among the eunuchs, whispers spread of a new idea, one that would bring the palace to its knees. They spoke of overthrowing the Sultan's inner circle and placing one of their own in a position of unimaginable power. It wasn't enough to just gain influence. They wanted to own the empire's very heart. Ahmed, with his cold, calculating mind, was the one who dreamed the biggest. But his ambitions weren't entirely his own. Beneath his surface of calculated reserve, there was a deep well of resentment, a feeling shared by many of his brothers-in-arms. The eunuchs had always been tools of the Sultan's will, bent to serve his desires without any true power of their own. But now, as they watched the empire's stability crumble, they realized that perhaps the time had come for them to take what had always been out of reach. This growing faction of eunuchs was led by a man named Farid. He was older than Ahmed, experienced in the palace's intricate web of politics, and known for his ruthless cunning. While Ahmed dreamed of power, Farid saw it as something that could be seized, not in the distant future, but now. He was the one who pushed for a more immediate action, speaking with the cold certainty that made many of the younger eunuchs uneasy. He knew the palace better than anyone, understood its weaknesses, and had a particular taste for revenge. His hatred for the Sultan, who had taken everything from him, ran deep. The plot was simple, though fraught with danger. Ahmed and Farid would act swiftly, using their position to influence key figures in the palace, those who had grown disillusioned with the Sultan's weak rule. A handful of loyal guards, some disgruntled viziers, and a select group of eunuchs would strike in the dead of night. The plan was to kill the Sultan, or at the very least, incapacitate him, leaving the empire vulnerable and ready to be taken. Once the Sultan was gone, they would install their own puppet ruler, a eunuch, who would hold the power, but in truth, it would be the eunuchs who ruled. But as they gathered, the cracks began to show. There were men among them who had doubts, who still believed in the Sultan's power, who were afraid of the consequences. The fear that had once kept them in line now began to take hold again. Would the bloodshed be worth it? Would the world burn? Or would they simply replace one tyrant with another? Still, the conspirators pressed forward. Ahmed stood in the garden one night, watching the stars through the thick foliage. His hand shook slightly as he gripped the cold stone edge of the fountain. Was this truly what he had wanted? Was this what he had been waiting for, the chance to take power from those who had once held it? Or was this simply the inevitable result of a life spent in shadows, where the light of power could only be reached through violence?
The palace was full of secrets, of power struggles and hidden motives, but nothing prepared Ahmed for the final turning point, the moment when everything spiraled out of control. The night of the coup was fast approaching. The eunuchs had set their plan in motion, but what they didn't know was that they were not the only ones watching. The Sultan's spies had been more vigilant than they had realized. They had been gathering information from the shadows, from whispers in the corridors, from those who have sold their own mother for a moment of favor. The conspirators were being watched, and the empire's fragile foundations were about to tremble under the weight of betrayal. The night of the rebellion came like a thunderstorm, swift and brutal. As the eunuchs moved through the palace in the stillness of the dark, every step was weighed with the echo of centuries of silence. In their quest for power, they became the very thing they had once despised, manipulators of the empire's destiny. But in the end, the shadows that they had lived in turned against them. The Sultan's spies had already alerted his inner circle. What was meant to be a quiet coup exploded in violence, the palace descending into chaos. The eunuch's plot crumbled before it could even fully unfurl. Trust was shattered. The conspirators were hunted one by one, their dreams of power extinguished in a sea of blood. The empire didn't collapse that night, but its heart, the delicate web of power that had held it together, was forever scarred. The eunuchs, who had once been the silent watchers of the harem, would never be the same. They had tasted the fruit of rebellion, but it had been poisoned. In the end, their legacy was not one of power seized, but of ambition unfulfilled. The palace returned to its rhythm, but the memory of that night lingered, a warning to all who dared to rise from the shadows. Power, after all, is a delicate thing. It is both beautiful and deadly, capable of breaking the strongest men and destroying the empire itself. So as we close the chapter on this tragic tale, we're left to reflect on the nature of power, how it's shaped by those who wield it, and how the desire to hold it can consume even the most silent of men. The eunuch's plot was one born of frustration, of yearning for a world where they could be more than tools, but it was also one of folly. In the end, they discovered the truth, that power, once taken, can never be held without great cost. Thank you for watching.
If you enjoyed this dive into history's darker corners, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories. The shadows of the past always have another story to tell.